Hey folks, Steve here with another Dark Valley video. Today we're going to be looking at turn 17, which in this game is November 1942, with a mixed weather turn. So the mud is starting to solidify a little bit. It's still not great conditions for the Axis, as they are forced to constrict themselves back a little bit and prepare for a winter defense against the Soviets. Now, since the last video, I got some commentary and a reminder from Ted that I have a number of reduced strength numerous reduced strength Soviet armies on the board, and I could restore them to full strength, but they need to have been pulled back from the front lines to do so. And of course, by the end of last turn, it was too late to do that. So one thing I need to try to do this turn is find places where I can do that safely, pull some units back, and rotate some full-strength guys in. I mean, at this point, I don't think the Soviets are hurting too badly in terms of like per hex strength, because they can replace, they can get new guys in. Right now, it's positioning. Where have the Soviets been out of position, and where have the Axis been exploiting that? I think that's really the main concern that I have with how they're doing. Now you can see since the last turn, our broad position, up here near Leningrad, Moscow's over here. We're sort of getting pushed back as the Axis here, and then all along the line here, getting to the rivers in Rostov, and that is probably high watermark for the Axis here for the campaign. As we saw at the end of the last video, the Voronezh pocket finally was collapsed, though a few units managed to avoid being destroyed. Still a good series of events there for the Axis. From here, we are reaching the point where there's nowhere left for the Axis to really be able to go. Now that we're heading into winter, the Axis can't really launch any offensives. They have to hold until the next spring, at least until May of 1943. A lot of stuff is going to be happening between now and then through these next couple of winter-focused turns, though there will be some reinforcements for both sides. A lot of elite guard units are going to be coming on the board for the Soviets, so the balance of power will start to shift there. You can already start to see a growing number of red-colored units on the map. And yeah, we'll have to see. So 1943, if the Axis can survive a winter onslaught, they do have the potential to look at one last sort of offensive-type action, but they're not gonna win the game. We're sitting at 35 victory points. We would need 38 to win as the Axis. The closest victory cities at this point are Tula, which isn't too terribly far away, right there. Moscow, which, hey, I mean, if we can get Moscow, we'd love to get Moscow. And I guess Kalinin up here, but, probably not going to get Kalinin. And likewise, we're probably not going to get Saratov up here, or Engel, since it's across the Volga River. Not going to get Stalingrad. And while we had been thinking about Krasnodar, I just don't see that happening now that the Soviets have been able to reinforce. The Axis they're getting towards the edge of the map, and I was reminded a few videos ago that the Soviets can get supply off these military roads here along this edge of the map. So I can't just knock them out of supply. I could make a play for Krasnodar, but I can't just knock those guys out of supply. I have to force them off the map, I guess, to eliminate them and hold those military roads. The oil automatic victory is out of the question at this point. So, yeah, for the long haul, the Axis needs to hold on, maybe get one last couple of big punches to maybe make some ground, I'm not sure. And then the game's going to shift to a Soviet initiative cadence where it's really going to be the Soviets who are trying to defeat the Axis rather than the other way around. And, of course, to win, the Soviets are going to have to be diving deep into Germany proper, way over here on the other side of the map. And look at that distance, just way far away. So we'll have to see. It could very well be that, yes, the Axis did not win World War II by defeating the Soviet Union, or at least defeating the Soviet Union and still losing World War II somehow, but it will instead be, ha ha ha, the Germans did better than history, and so the Axis wins via that mechanism. The Soviets did not manage to take Berlin, for instance. And I guess maybe you look at that as, well, the Western Allies got to Berlin, and the Western Allies took most of Germany by that date, and then the Cold War's off to a different start, right? Fun stuff like that. So, okay, before I started recording, I did do the reinforcements. The Soviets managed to get some guys on the map. Good stuff. And then I also bothered this time to put some units in the Stavka Reserve. So we get a couple of tank corps there, as well as a cavalry and an army. We also get these bridgehead markers on this turn. And basically what they allow me to do, and I'll have to double check the rules as we get going here, basically allows the Soviets to ignore river restrictions in certain cases, which will come in handy because the Soviets managed to figure out how to do river crossings very well, I guess, is the thinking here. And I've read a book where it talks about that, I think, but I believe that's what that is representing. The Axis got like one division, which we put on the map somewhere, and then we got some more infantry replacements, which is helpful because they're going to start getting beat up here. But you can see over the next couple of turns, the reinforcements to come, decent number for the Soviets, a little tiny bit for the Axis. Then over winter, it looks like we're going to get a lot more stuff for the Axis, which is good. You can see a lot of red. A lot of that red is a little misleading because it's not, most of the time, those aren't going to be units that are just placed on the map. They're going to replace units already out here. So it won't be, these huge stacks of units that are just showing up, adding to what's already on the board. It'll be units are being replaced by better units, but you need to understand that's still an increase in combat factors on the map, which will have an effect over time as the combats play out. So, yeah, I took care of the reinforcements, the replacements. Those guys are all on the map. I also did air bases, which nothing really changed there. And I did do strategic movement. So the Axis just used some short rail moves to kind of get a head start on getting units repositioned. The Soviets did likewise in just trying to get some units closer to what is now starting to be a real line here, starting from where Voronezh fell down along here. You can see there's now units on both sides, creating a new line after all the breakouts that were occurring over the summer. And we'll settle into it. So the initiative for this turn will be to the Soviets, according to the turn record track. So the Soviets will get to pick the first chit, and here's the chit recipe for the turn, and you will notice some differences. So we have logistics as always, but the Axis have the same of what they had last turn. They have a movement-only chit and a combat-only chit, and we got to pick one Panzer army again. I decided for the 2nd Panzer because while the Voronezh pocket is closed, things are kind of in a scattered situation, and I need to kind of clean all of that up. So it wouldn't be a bad idea to have another activation possibility sooner, get those guys in the line, and hey, if we can make a couple of attacks, we still have an opportunity here to do some stuff before it gets more difficult. But for the Soviets, they get a lot more. In fact, they get some new chits. So they get a general movement chit, nothing too crazy, but then they get 2 different combat chits. So the combat Zhukov we've had before, but now we also have the combat Stavka, and it basically works the same way, except looking at, instead of doing the Zhukov command radius for fully supplied combat, it will be looking at the Stavka HQ. But the Stavka HQ has a much broader range, and so when that marker comes up, a lot more units will get to activate. So that's really important, and I'll need to decide where I want to put the HQ units so that they're at their most valuable when doing their activities. And then finally, they're going to get their normal Stavka chit here, which that's why we have reserves this time. I do want to use those and place them where they're important as we need them, and because they're mostly high mobility units, they'll have the movement to get to where they need to be. The final one is the deep battle chit. And basically the way that works is the Soviet player may, I'm reading from the rule book, the Soviet player may activate either Stavka or Zhukov, not both, and then activate Soviet units within its command range for deep battle. When activated, Stavka and Zhukov may move during deep battle. Da 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 da. And how that works is it's combat and then move. And to be clear, it's combat and then not move and then combat, where you pick. It's combat and then move. And deep battle, from like a military doctrine standpoint, is kind of a lot like the Blitzkrieg. The idea being that you create a hole in the line and then you're penetrating deep into the enemy's territory, held territory, to put them off balance. There's a distinction between Blitzkrieg tactics and deep battle, and I've tried to like sum it up clearly somehow in my head, and I just can't do it. They're very similar. So, but the Soviet military academia, whatever, called it deep battle. So you could imagine in this turn, the Soviets have a lot of capability to do, combat with Zhukov, combat with Stavka, then combat again, and then dive through where we've penetrated or where we've broken open holes in the line and dive on through and maybe create some encirclements, right? And I think this is the case where with Stavka as well, with the Stavka chit, you're going to have potentially 4 different combat actions this turn for the Soviets. So all hell's going to break loose potentially if the Soviets can manage to put together a good attack. Now, because of this, because of the way this is set up, I do need to think carefully about what do I want to have done first. And the Soviets outnumber the Axis chits by a couple. So if we did move like I usually do, I can use that to get Soviet units into place, and then all the other chits that are going to come out are all going to be about battling and then moving potentially, and I think that's fine by me. I think that makes sense. The alternative would be to try to have deep battle happen right at the beginning and then try to push through, but I think it makes more sense to do a movement, and I can reposition Stavka to be in a different position to help smash through lines and wreak havoc. So I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have move be the first action here. I'm going to put the rest of these guys, Stavka goes into the available markers. And then the rest of this will just go into the cup. And we'll see what happens. So I'll stop here. Long intro of getting through it. When I come back, we will have completed that first movement, and then we'll start drawing from the cup. Okay, movement is complete. Now you might be looking at this and wondering, well, Steve, you didn't move a whole lot too far up. That's because in some of these cases, I'm not going to be able to hit the German units as hard as I would like to in certain areas because I'm only going to get one shot. So, down here, I think we're okay for the moment. I've got one German unit that's way out of supply, or will be when logistics comes up. So we're going to let him shrivel, and then we'll get into position over the rest of the winter. We're basically within enough movement points that we can start getting into them and hitting them. But all along the rest of the line, we're just we're a little weak yet. I need to get better positioning. And because you have the one unit rule where like not most, but a lot of units can't attack by themselves, I'm just trying to get the line formed here. So I think we're okay for the moment in a lot of these areas. There just won't be a lot of attacking. This is where the Soviets are weak, honestly. Now, by comparison, up here, we're a lot better off, though we still have a lot of these reduced armies. I did pull back one, but I can't really afford to pull back too many, honestly. I'm also trying to fix our little bubble there that could lead to a salient that could collapse right here and knock out a bunch of Soviet units. So we moved around to kind of keep that from happening if we can. Though to be honest, there's a strong possibility that we're not going to be able to fix that situation as is. Our main hope here is that the Oh, you know what? And I forgot to move Stavka. I need to do that. So we'll get him. Let's see. 1, 2, 5, 6, 7. And it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah. So what we're setting up now is, and at least I'm pretty certain I can have those HQs that close together. I'm pretty certain. I'm not sure if there's any restriction on that. I don't think there is. So what we're going to do is the Soviets need to just bank on smashing through Armored Group Center. That is the whole strategy of this turn. Because, yeah, Voronezh got taken, yeah, we're getting pushed back. What we need to do is make the Germans off center. Because right now, if the Germans keep trying to punch through, maybe they could wrap around and get to Moscow that way. What we need to do is just rip their guts out through here, and all of a sudden a straight beeline to Warsaw gets opened up, and we can start screwing up the Axis. I mean, and you can imagine if positioned right, we blow open a hole. Well, hey, get some Soviet units going this way. Get to Riga. Start cutting supply lines that way. Start causing those problems. Start putting these guys out of position. I mean, there's a lot that could be gained from removing those units. So I think that's where repeated combats should take place, and whatever else deep battle can give us along the way. So we'll look into it. Now the other thing is, of course, Ted pointed out in a comment that sometimes die rolling is just okay for the Soviets, because if they take a step loss, it's easier for them to take a step loss than the Axis. So hey, no result, no effect results on combat are fine. And if there's a chance to cause a step loss, I mean, sure, if you lose a step, okay, you fix that. But Germans taking step losses are just bad in general, because it's hard for them to get stuff back. So I'm trying to keep that in mind, but switching back and forth, my timidity might be getting the better of me some of the time. But I think the Soviets are just going to have to pick up the pace and start smashing the Axis when the momentum shifts here. We're going to go to the cup. We'll pull out the first action here, and it is Axis combat. Okay. Interesting time for this to come up. I didn't want to use Stavka yet. It's still early in the turn. So we're pulling combat. And this will allow the Axis to try to pop the Soviets in the face before they can do much. Now, I think the combats that we're going to look at are really going to be about, can we continue to make this salient a problem for the Soviets? Can we try to smash a couple of these reduced units around here? And then, is there anything that can be done along here to continue to make this situation tough for the Soviets? I think that's the idea for the Axis. I'm going to take us off recording. I'm going to take care of the Axis combat. This will be their only regular combat of the turn besides their 2nd Panzer. So maybe what we'll do is try to set up some attacks that will benefit a 2nd Panzer activation later in the turn, followed by movement. That could be very valuable. So we'll look to do that, maybe even attempt to try to create a Tula pocket. I don't know. We'll be back. Okay, well, the Axis managed to force a step loss retreat where there was the point spearhead of that salient. So they sort of are starting to it's sort of good. It was like a preventive attack. Now, once the combat Zhukov and combat Stavka markers come in, they won't be able to do maybe quite as much as they could. But this guy stuck out here is still in a decent amount of danger. We made some attacks over here and we pushed some stuff back, but it's that salient there with the Soviets is still pretty hardy. And we tried a couple of other minor attacks, which ended up just sort of hurting the Axis, where they took a step loss. So not a great result. But fortunately, I had railed this guy up to help cover So when the Axis gets to move, they'll move into position for that. So yeah, not a great combat for the Axis really, but at this point they really shouldn't be going on the offensive very much. So they really need to stick around. But don't want to take losses we don't need to take. So going back to the cup, we're gonna pull. It is Combat Zhukov. So, as always with Combat Zhukov marker, units that are not in range of Zhukov will be out of supply for attack. So I will do a quick check to see if there are any unsupplied attacks worth doing. I suspect not, because a lot of the time it's either attacker takes a step loss or no effect. There's no reason to attack. There's just no reason to attack, unless they're in supply via the Zhukov HQ. So I'll do a double check just in case. There's a couple of spots maybe down here in the south. It still might be worthwhile trying if I can get high enough odds. But if not, whatever. So okay, I'll stop recording. We'll take care of the Combat Zhukov. Zhukov is kind of hidden right now. He's right here. So really, it's just we're going to try to make that punch in Army Group Center like we were hoping to make. So we will be back. Okay, so with the attacks over, I really tried to make some action happen over here. I used the Soviet artillery and I pinged off a step loss from a stack, which worked out pretty good. And I made some attacks around here, but I just didn't get anywhere, which is a real shame. I even tried a very high odds attack against that corps, and I rolled a 1, which was a no result. It was so close, but we'll see what happens in the turns to come, or the actions to come. I attacked that poor tank. I realized, I was looking at it, I was going, wait a minute. There's a reduced strength tank division sitting there in the woods, so it's only got a 2 combat factor strength. I was going to make an attack that, even though it was unsupplied with a -2, it would be 6-1 odds. This is the perfect moment. But as I was getting ready for the attack, I was able to do air support, and it ended up only being no result when it was reduced down to like a 2-1. So that's okay, because on the next Soviet combat, they're going to try again, and there's one more air unit that could potentially support, but if the air support gets used up elsewhere, we could very well basically create an encirclement of these units right here, which would be awesome for the Soviets. But if the Axis manages to get to shift some units around, then, well, oh well. So we'll see. It depends on how the chip comes out. So we'll check it out. What do we get? And we get logistics. Okay, well, I'm not sure if this is good or bad for everybody, but I will say that our poor guy down here... No, I forgot to say, I did some bombardment down here, and I killed a 1-4 unit so that this guy could slip home, but he's going to have a hard time doing it because he's out of supply. So much for that. Everybody else, I believe, is in supply across the board. I don't think there's anybody who is currently out of supply. Even these guys and that salient for the Soviets can all trace back to the rail line that has Soviet units on it that go back to Moscow. So I think, yeah, everything else is in supply. So that's a very easy logistics phase. In fact, boom, we're done. It's very easy to calculate that because all of our supply depots are where they need to be. So I will go to the cup. And what do we get? We get 2nd Panzer. This is possibly this is not a great time to get the 2nd Panzer activation, unfortunately. So I will take myself off camera, and we're going to work the 2nd Panzer. Now, the 2nd Panzer is located down here. So the number of units that will actually activate isn't very many. So this might be kind of a dead activation, but we can at least move a few units around, which will be valuable. So we'll look to do that. We'll be right back. Okay, so the 2nd Panzer activation was pretty straightforward. Basically, I used the movement to get a few guys in position, and then I moved some mechanized units and was able to attack at the end of the move with just those guys. and we basically forced a mechanized corps of the Soviets to retreat and just put ourselves in okay position for the next couple of steps. I really wish I could have moved these guys up a little bit, but they were out of range of activation for the HQ. And I think before I end the action, I wanted to have made sure this guy moved. And so we're going to move him up like so. And so he's got a nice little activation sphere there. I might have to send him back down south, but I want to keep as many units in activation range as possible. And in fact, I may even just move him up one. He can sit there. So they can activate more stuff next turn. So yeah, we're working our way through it. And now we'll go back to the cup. Now at this point, I need to decide, I should think about, does it make sense to do a Stavka chit pool, plop down some units and get them somewhere? I don't know that I have any obvious places that I would want to do that. Maybe, well, maybe in Stalingrad and then have them fly forward. I don't know. I can't, yeah. See, the thing about the Stavka chit is that if they pop in and then they're in range of the Stavka, HQ, they can do more fun stuff. Yeah. So they can't move unless I'm in range of Stavka, which if I plopped them down in Moscow, Tula, they would be in range and then they could go do stuff. But there's not a lot of obvious things we could go do. Well, let's see, how weak are some of these guys? Yeah, they're getting weak. I'll hold off on Stavka for now. We'll pop them in later if we have to, maybe to cover any losses that go bad for combat. So we'll go to the chit pool. Right now it's Axis movement or combat Zhukov or combat Stavka or deep battle. So we'll see what we get. And we pull, we get Axis movement. Well, there you go. Okay, so I need to think about this. The remaining activities are all going to be the Soviets. So this is the last thing the Axis can do. We're going to do movement. We're probably going to cover our butt when it comes to the Panzer unit that's out there up in the north. We're going to try to massage the situation in the center and try to get better coverage. We're going to move some units up. We're going to get arranged in a better position. This guy's going to try to get home, but he's not going to get very far. And that'll be as much as we can really do. So I'm going to take care of the Axis movement, and then we'll be back. Okay, so the Axis movement is complete. We shuffled some units around. We're trying to get that mech guy home, though he's in a rough shape. All along the line, we did some positionings to kind of solidify that line. We sort of covered up this little bubble here as best we could. And then we're trying to cover this, but gosh, we just don't have a lot of guys here. And I think the Soviets potentially have an opportunity to crack this line over here. I think maybe I was too daring in trying to close up a salient there. It's just really rough territory and trying to get guys moved in. Now the only other option I would have would be, let's see, that would be 1, 2. Nah, I can't even get some guys back. So yeah, things are kind of tense over there. And obviously now the Soviets are going to get back-to-back activations for combat, and we could see some pretty bloody stuff happen here. So we're going to go to the cup. Whoops. I just accidentally threw one right out of the cup. And it was Combat Stavka. Okay, so Combat Stavka, again, it's going to be units that are in range of the Stavka headquarters. can participate in combat fully supplied. Everywhere else, it'll be unsupplied, meaning a -2 to whatever we roll. So there might actually be some attacks that are worth launching here and that are unsupplied or treated as unsupplied -2. So I'm going to take that and take a look, and I'll stop recording. When we come back, we'll take care of the final chits here. So there's Deep Battle, and then the Stavka activation. And I think I'm going to go ahead and decide now that I'm going to have Stavka go last after Deep Battle. So we're going to have Combat Stavka, Deep Battle, then the Stavka activation. And my thought process is here that we're going to do the Combat Stavka, so the units in range of Stavka will attack, hopefully bust up the line a little bit. Then we'll do Deep Battle, so we'll hit the weakened line again, and then have that followed up with a movement to exploit. And then we can be a little dangerous if we wanted to, and maybe leave some holes in the line via movement, and then have our Stavka reserves pop into Moscow and then fling themselves forward to close up those holes. So we'll have created a nice opportunity to put some hurting on the Axis. So that's what we're going to do. I will pause and pause the action and come back on camera between each chit. So again, I'll just throw it on camera so you can see. We're Combat Stavka, Deep Battle, then Stavka. And yeah, after I do the moves for each chit, we'll come back and I'll show you in stages what's happening. So Combat Stavka, we'll be right back. Okay, so Combat Stavka is over. We saw, as a part of it, a step loss for both sides here, which is weakening the Axis line. Not too many other places did it really make sense. We did try, well, we failed to hit anything with our Soviet artillery, though it was a close run thing. We did cause a step loss for both sides here in that little that area over there that's exposed. So yeah, there may be a possibility to pull those units out, but I've been hoping to make use of the situation a little bit better as the Axis, but I'm just not quite getting there. We did try to attack here, but the additional coverage by another unit basically caused an attacker loss because I rolled a 1. So the situation's still tense, and I maybe should have attacked elsewhere rather than try to cut that unit out of supply, but it's kind of tough to say. But the nice thing is, the Soviets get to attack again, so we're going to do Deep Battle now. Deep Battle, and again, what Deep Battle is going to allow us to do is we're going to attack everywhere. We can attack unrestricted across the line, I believe. Just trying to find the page in the book again to make sure I don't get it wrong. I don't want to get it wrong. We can activate the HQs and then activate Soviet units within command range for Deep Battle. Okay, so it's not everywhere. It's not everywhere. It's just where we have our the HQs, but the HQs get to move first. We can move them into a better position if we want to, and then they can combat and then move, which is pretty powerful. So I'll need to decide where do I want to put the HQ units. What I think I'm going to do, actually, is I'm going to pull Zhukov down a little bit so he can keep these guys going, and I'm going to put Stavka, maybe try to move him over here, or move it over here, and then provide the ability for these units over here to beat up on the Axis thinning line there. Because maybe what we do is we knock these guys out and start moving down this way and do something over here, and then like encircle Army Group Center. Maybe. I don't know. We'll see. So we're going to do Deep Battle. I will move the HQs around. I will then do Combat and Move, and we'll see what the board looks like then. Okay, I lied. I did Deep Battle and then I did Stavka just because I was so demoralized by how well the Deep Battle went. I had to just keep playing. So the one good thing that the Soviets did is they did force a retreat. So So that unit had to retreat back to Orel, but it couldn't progress any farther during the post-combat move due to Zox. Elsewhere, all along the line, pretty much every attack failed. I don't know if I'm just having bad die roll luck as the Soviets, but I mean, it was close. I even tried a very ballsy attack here and I ended up getting an attacker loss. So, some of it, I guess, is also the fact that, the combat results B table just isn't great to begin with, but I'm not rolling well. I'm not rolling well. I'm rolling, reasonably, if I were to chart it out, I bet I've been rolling reasonably well as the Axis, and I've been rolling probably a little under average for the Soviets in terms of, I don't know, goodness. And I know with a 1d6, it's a flat distribution, but you would think, I don't know, I mean, if you were to net all the results together, I bet I'm a little under the 3.5 average on a 1d6 over time in terms of numerical values added together. Anyway, mathematics aside, our first instance of D battle did not go well. It did not go well for the Soviets at all. I thought it would be a lot better, and just is not. Though I think I do prefer my HQ setup right now because Stavka gets a lot of these guys in activation range. Down here, he's getting some guys in activation range. I might even move Zhukov down a little bit. And we can start maybe pushing down this way, and I think that would be all right too. If we can start to kind of put, because it would be really great if we really could just sort of get out like this and get Army Group Center totally screwed up. I mean, that would be super devastating, and the Axis would have to pull back, really, honestly, and try to figure out how to shorten the line. So yeah, with the Stavka marker itself, I plunked some units into Kalinin, and then I had them surge forward so they could help cover over here and maybe cause some havoc to come. That's looking back now, maybe that's a mistake. I don't know. I also put units down here with the intention that they'll just keep pushing down this way if we can. Overall, the rest of the winter is going to start setting in, and maybe that'll be better for the Soviets. But just right now, that was not a great turn. I don't think it was a great turn for either the Axis or the Soviets. Neither could really do much. The mixed weather made it tough. But next turn will hopefully be a little bit better. We're going to start to put pressure on the Axis as the Soviets down here near Rostov. We're going to move this whole line up, and we're going to start attacking. And those tank panzer units down there can only take so many losses themselves before they're off the board. So we'll end up applying so much pressure that we're going to force the Axis to pull back, I think, is what's going to end up happening. That's my bet. We'll see how the dice go for us. Okay, so all of the logistics stuff is over. No one's going to be attrited out of sorts this turn, so no worries about that. Any Axis depot advancement, I really don't see a reason to move any of them at the moment, so that's pretty much it for the turn. Turn is over. So that was turn 17. Next turn, and we're still sitting at 35 victory points. Next turn, we're going to be going into turn 18, and we'll get into proper snowy weather. Now, I guess I'm going to make this video a little bit longer because I want to reflect on a couple of things. So as of the end of this turn, this would be the end of the fall blouse scenario as defined by the scenario book. Now, if I go take a look at that, I just want to kind of measure where we're at. So, if we were playing the fall blouse scenario only, and not the full campaign, as I'm intending to do here, let's see, was there an automatic victory for the Axis? Well, the Axis would have needed to control Sevastopol, Stalingrad, Maikop, and Grozny, and exited 10 or more German units, at least 5 of which must be mechanized divisions, off the south map edge in the Caucasus via any of the 4 military roads, so it could have been any of them, thus capturing Baku off map. So, how close were we to doing any of that? Well, I made a decision partway through to just not really go for Stalingrad. I just reached a point where I didn't think it was worth overextending myself. I would have had to have taken Grozny, which is way here in the corner. of the map. And my cop, which is over here. So I'd never got units across the Donats River enough to have made that really feasible. Now, obviously, that's an automatic victory condition, so that would assume very successful movement. And yes, historically, the Axis was sort of playing down here a little bit for a while. But no, I could not have done that, that's for sure. The other condition would have been controlling Moscow, Leningrad, and Stalingrad, as well as Gorky. I forget where Gorky is on the map. Oh, it's way up. It's way up here. And yeah, for sure, I mean, that would have been assuming a major success in the center, and that didn't happen, though. That Voronezh pocket, you know, had we managed to do a few things better, we could have been doing better there. And then finally, if at the end of turn 17, that's the end of this turn, the Axis controls at least 37 victory hexes, and for the purposes of the scenario, Maikop and Grozny count as victory hexes. So we were close, right? 35, but we needed 2 more. And again, Tula, maybe, Stalingrad, had we really pushed for it, we could have gotten it. If I had really dedicated myself to a southern strategy and looked to capture Stalingrad and Krasnodar, this city and that city, I could see maybe saying like, oh, yep, we won. But I just pursued a different strategy. I focused more on a northern effort to try to maybe circumvent the Soviet defenses around Stalingrad and just go for Moscow from the south. That didn't really work out either. The Soviet victory condition for this scenario would have been the Soviet player wins at the end of turn 17 by avoiding all Axis victory conditions. So technically speaking, if we were playing this just as the scenario, we would call this a Soviet victory. However, I mean, I purposefully made a different campaign decision because I thought that would do better for me for the long haul. So by rule, we would say the Soviets won a Fall Blau playthrough here, but because I'm continuing on, and we're going to go ahead and start into turn 18 next time and play through the rest of the game in that format, then my decision to do what I did might be seen as good. We'll see how it pans out. I think it's giving me an earlier start on defense, but we'll have to see. Because once we get past this and we get to the spring and summer of 43, how that pans out will set the tempo, and then it'll be about the Axis defending, shortening their lines, ensuring that they can protect themselves, and they're going to run out the clock, basically. So the game's going to start to shift in tone soon, where the Axis is beating up on the Soviets to the Soviets are beating up on the Axis. We'll see how it goes. I think we'll call it a video there because the turn is indeed over now, and the analysis on the Fall Blau, Case Blue situation is complete. So starting next turn, we're going to be covering not a specific scenario anymore, though the next scenario that we would start would be Operation Zitadel, and that would be in the July of 43, but I'm sure the map will look quite different from the historical situation at Zitadel, but we do have a starting line over here that we could compare to, so it'll be interesting to see where we're at that point. Anywho, that's the end of the video, guys. If you like this, hit like. If you have not already subscribed and want to keep seeing more content like this, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. We will cover other games. I've been stuck on Dark Valley for a long time, but my channel has plenty of other material covering other topics. Check those out as well. And until next time, guys, take care and keep on gaming.